maybe part of the reason that the Raptors are being so aggressive right now in the trade market, targeting the likes of, there was reports it was Ja Morant. Maybe that's kind of faded away, but there have been concrete reports they've been interested in a guy like Anthony Davis or Domantas Sabonis. And I think to the majority of the fan base, that desire for the trade hasn't resonated with them as much. But it feels like the Raptors really do want to be aggressive. There could be a variety of reasons that's the case. Could it be the Raptors smell blood in this Eastern Conference? They've exceeded expectations, want to attack the potential Eastern Conference in the playoffs. And other people have speculated that maybe Bobby Webster, his seat's getting a little bit warm, and to lock down job security, he feels a need to be aggressive, make a trade now, and solidify his position with the team. But let's investigate a little bit further to see if that actually is the case. I have asked a lot this season, like, how do we treat Bobby Webster's tenure with the Raptors? Do we reset the clock after Masai Ujiri got fired? Is it now, okay, that was Masai Ujiri's team. Now it's Bobby Webster's team. The Bobby Webster tenure has just started, even though he's been our GM for a whole load of years now, helped construct the NBA championship team. Felt like all of the praise, or at least most of it, and criticism, all of the praise and criticism fell on Masai Ujiri's shoulders. So I don't really know behind the scenes what sort of power dynamic there was there. So I've always wondered how much of if we see success this year, or if we see failure this season, or whatever in between, how much of that is put on Bobby Webster versus Masai Ujiri? Like, if things aren't going well, if there are roster issues, like we still don't have a center, like there's not enough shooting, we have a couple players on horrific contracts that were signed in the last year and a half. How much of that is on Bobby Webster? How much is Bobby Webster at fault for that? I think we're somewhere in the middle where we need to start seeing improvements like pretty immediately with Bobby Webster, but enough, like there's enough leeway here to say, okay, now it's your time to be in charge and be the main decision maker here, that we can give a little bit of time and a little bit of a longer leash to him to kind of see what he can do. But maybe Bobby Webster was kind of feeling the pressure. Maybe that's why he was being so aggressive with the possible trades. Well, that was a good theory, but I'm happy that we have concrete reporting now to say that that is not the case whatsoever. According to reports from Michael Grange of Sportsnet, who he's a good source. You know, he's good. He's not one that's lying necessarily. He's ever lying, but I guess there could be like maybe questions over how much information he's being fed. But I think he's a genuine reporter who's providing reports based on what he deems to be concrete evidence. I think it's a solid source to work with. And he says that the Raptors are prepared to be patient with Webster over the long term. Like, I thought, like, once Masai Ujiri left, that Bobby was getting a longer contract. He was getting an extension because he got a raise to take on a bigger role, but kept the same title. But actually, there were suggestions that said that he was in the last year of his contract, and perhaps is scouring the market for bold moves that could accelerate the Raptors' timeline to make it show that he's worthwhile. The Raptors should keep him around. Well, it's actually the opposite of that, because he's not making the decision based on his contract status, because according to multiple sources, Bobby Webster and the Raptors have had exploratory discussions on a multi-year extension to his current deal, with talks expected to pick up after the trade deadline. So I think this can only be considered good news here. I, again, think that there should be a little bit of extra leeway with Bobby Webster, because it felt like Masai Ujiri was the head honcho there and was calling the shots at the end of the day. I'm sure Bobby Webster had a lot to do with the decision-making, and he is not exempt from criticism on how bad the Emmanuel Quickley contract looks a year and a half later, or how bad the Jakob Poeltl contract looks just 6 months later. He is not exempt from criticism at all from those things. But I think this is good because we're not making snappy decisions just to save your job, just to get a contract extension. Bobby Webster right now is looking to make decisions for the team that are going to benefit them for the long term, because there is confidence, it seems right now, from ownership, from Rodgers, that he is a guy that can stick with his team for a number of years. So when they're making calls around Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Domantas Sabonis, Ja Morant, whoever else they may be calling to get trades around, they are generally looking for long-term plans for this team and not just quick fixes, which I like, which I definitely like. What we're going to learn now and in the coming, I think we'll learn in the coming weeks and maybe in the next year or two about Bobby Webster, is if he shares Masai Ujiri's level of aggression and appetite for, big moves. Last season, the Raptors made a pretty bold move when they were a tanking team. They traded some assets, not a lot, but they traded stuff to bring in Brandon Ingram and committed to paying him a handsome bit of money that his own agency said that nobody else was going to give him. Masai Ujiri was always swimming around looking for the big fish in the trade market. And though it didn't really come off ever, there was consistent action with trade deadlines. There was consistent aggression to be better. Sometimes over-aggression, like the trade deadline where they acquired Jakob Poeltl back from the San Antonio Spurs. A trade that kind of slowly is getting worse with age, when initially it didn't even look like a good trade to begin with. It felt like they were clinging on to a core that didn't really have a lot of legs in making a playoff push. They've turned things around pretty admirably this season. The Raptors are the 4 seed at the time that we're doing the stream here. They're in the mix definitely to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but there still could be further strengthening that we see here. So again, I'm just really curious about Bobby Webster's style for the front office. Will it be reminiscent of that aggression that Masai Ujiri had, or will it be a bit more reserved? Seems, based on the reports we're getting, that it's aggressive. How desperate will they be to make the trades? Well, it's good to know that he has his job security, because he won't be so inclined to maybe make a trade that he probably shouldn't make. And it feels like, Bobby Webster learned from Masai Ujiri. Masai Ujiri was always, like I said, poking around these big fish. Rarely did a trade materialize because the Raptors were always trying to find a good deal. Then there was a situation where Brandon Ingram was available for expiring salary and a first-round pick from the Pacers, who went on to make the NBA Finals. Now, I know the Pacers suck now, and it would be nice to have that pick, but at the time, not a great first-round pick, and expiring salary to bring in Brandon Ingram. Felt like a pretty good deal for a high-quality player. Masai Ujiri called it pre-agency because the Raptors don't attract free agents. This is where the Raptors get their business done, and they got it done. It has absolutely worked out so far with Brandon Ingram on the Raptors. So there is a lot that can change, and I think there's stuff that should change. Personally, if we're not going from Ja Morant, I'm leaning towards, ducking the tax and bringing in some supplementary help to the center position. But maybe Bobby Webster could be approaching things very differently here. Case Cedar in the chat said Bobby Webster is definitely not locked. I think Rodgers will either get him to trade a player and he can bring in revenue and seat getters. Also, Rodgers I feel like won't care about spending money as long as they are competitive and can sell out the seats. For example, the Blue Jays. Kind of disagree. There are a lot of stricter restrictions on salary caps in the NBA, and I don't think that that Rodgers will be looking at this current Raptors team right now and think that it is appropriate to be a tax team. Really, when you're a tax team, that is a sign that you need to be a contender. And as well as the Raptors have looked this season, I don't quite think that they're in that position to be a contender. So I think there will be a strong desire to duck the tax. I don't feel like there will be a lot of push from ownership to make a big trade and get asses in seats. If they really want a lot of people in seats, I think they could lower the price of tickets, and that would draw a lot more interest. But feels like the Raptors are moving things in the right direction right now. We're having a quality season so far. Scottie Barnes is starting to look like, a superstar player that we thought we had in his rookie season. Things are looking tremendous there. I don't think the Raptors need to force things here, and it doesn't feel like, with the extension potentially coming into play for Barrett, that Rodgers is looking to force things for the team as well.